Bilingual Redditors, have you ever heard someone talk about you secretly in another language that didn't think you understood? I'm Hispanic and fluent in both English and Spanish, and people often think I don't speak Spanish. So there was this one time I was at a laundromat folding clothes, while these two Hispanic ladies are at a table across from me folding their clothes. Both of them are speaking loudly in Spanish, so I couldn't help but overhear what they were talking about. They start talking about alcohol. One of them said ever since she got married and had a kid she stopped drinking. The other chick was saying that she loved getting drunk and could not live without alcohol, that she wanted a boyfriend so he could buy her alcohol and take care of her kid. Then they both start talking about their ideal boyfriend. One of them says that she is lucky to have found her husband because he is everything she wanted in a guy. The other chick was listing off a huge checklist of her perfect guy. Hot guy, must worship her, buy her everything, amazing job, clean, cook, take care of kids, etc. She then is interrupted by her friend saying that she was never going to find her perfect guy with her list being so long. She then turns and looks towards me saying, "What about a guy like him?" Her friend immediately rejected that idea. She then began to make fun of my clothes, hair, glasses, everything. I'm a pretty nerdy looking dude. She says how I look like a loser who is doing nothing in life, probably that poor, and won't be able to buy her things, and more. I think to myself that this chick is quite rude and loudly reply in Spanish, "I wouldn't be into a chick like yourself, because I wouldn't want a lazy drunk for a girlfriend." She got silent and just stared at me. Her friend began to laugh uncontrollably. Live in South Korea and have pretty decent Korean skills. Found an English-speaking dentist advertised on an expat website because it's the kind of complicated situation where you would rather have treatment options explained in English. I didn't let on that I understood Korean though. They had just put in the gooey mixture mold to get an impression for making a crown, and I heard the dental assistant ask, "Is she Indian?" But don't they have a caste system in India? How can they live like that? The widespread opinion amongst Koreans is that Southeast Asians are beneath them, so I also picked up on the disgust in her voice. The dentist proceeded to inform her that I was from India and it's a terrible way to live, and there are so many people living there. To which I respond by spitting out the mold and taking off with the dentist about how unprofessional it was to speak about clients while they are in the chair having treatment. He tried to apologize and make excuses and told me to understand his situation. Common Korean response when they do something wrong, to which I replied, "Please understand my situation. I'm a South African, 4th gen Indian descent. Living in Korea for 5 years, and for 5 years everywhere I go people stare about me, insist that I must be Indian and can't possibly be African, and talk about me like I'm invisible." I told him that he should not advertise to the expat community because he doesn't deserve their business. At this point, pent-up anger at this kind of repeated incident came rushing through, and for a usually passive-aggressive personality I got mean. I told the dentist that, while his dentist assistant thinks she can judge me in my presence and thinks she knows who I am, I speak better Korean than his assistant can speak English and probably earn more than her. This is a low blow aimed at how Koreans value monetary status and feel that it gives social standing, and that would shock them since they thought I was someone from India they believe could not have these things. I then asked him why he hired people like her. This was followed by more groveling and I'm sorries and deep bows. Finished treatment, had no choice, and left by saying I would inform all the expats I knew about that incident. Oh, yes. All the time. My other language I speak is Hungarian, which is really obscure and not related to any other language beyond vague grammatical ties to Finnish and Estonian, and there are less than 15 million native speakers, of which just under 10 million live in Hungary proper. So Hungarian speakers will often just assume it's a secret language when outside Hungary that no one else will understand, because 99% of the time it's true. That said, there are enough Hungarians in some places like San Francisco that it's best to not assume this, and I overheard people quite a lot the summer I worked there. I remember for example hearing a couple arguing on a Saturday night in the grocery store, in the tone that normally you'd be having that argument at home, but they assumed no one else understood them. I've overheard hugely emotional goodbyes and confessions in train stations and airports that likewise should have been at home. You really just sorta cringe and turn the music up loudly on your MP3 player because telling them to stop would just be more awkward for everyone involved. My mom and dad had the best story like this though, when they were in Austria for their first Christmas as a married couple. Apparently at the table next to them at Christmas Eve dinner in a restaurant there was a man by himself who had a German Shepherd, and he was letting the dog literally eat the food off his plate and all sorts of things like that. So my mom spent the entire dinner complaining about this guy letting his dog do all these things in a restaurant point in Hungarian. But at the end of the meal as he got up the man came over to their table and said Kalam's Karaksonia Nepakut Kivanok and left. In Hungarian that's the polite way of wishing someone a happy Christmas holiday. Props to that guy and props to my mom for telling this story to us as kids, to not rely on our secret language too much in public. This is me, a lot. I have a thing for languages, so I've learned Italian, French, Greek, and working on Turkish, plus my native English and Spanish. I live in DC, and we get tourists from all over the world, but the ones that talk the most shit are other Hispanics that don't think I can speak Spanish, because I'm American, and speak almost exclusively in English with my brothers. A lot call me Credo for purposely keeping my distance, but I just like to give people their privacy and don't naturally speak to strangers. Once this Italian chick mentioned to her friend on the metro about a cute guy in a blue jacket. Took me a few seconds to look around before I realized they were talking about me, but when I did I blushed like crazy. They freaked out cause they knew I knew. In Paris my brother and I walked into souvenir shop and the guy at the cashier started talking shit about my brother, who was admittedly being a typical American loudmouth. He said something about refusing to speak English for the brutes. I sternly told my brother we were leaving that shithole in French, which my brother only understood from my change in demeanor and agger stare at the cashier. I worked really hard on my Italian to make sure I don't have much of an accent, well, a Roman one at least. The nicest people are Italians when they find out I have exactly 0% Italian ancestry. My family has gone to this one Greek restaurant for years. When I came back from college with a decent grasp of basic Greek I could follow along with what the waitresses were saying. But nothing bad, mostly talking about their kids. Not much experience with Turkish people outside of study friends, since I only started learning it after I visited the country. Oh, and once in Colombia, a white American couple were talking about their dinner from the night before. I asked them where they ate, and they were noticeably shocked. Oh my god yes, I have so many. I'm half white half Filipino, but I look like a skinhead with a slight tan. Nobody would ever believe I spoke Tagalog, so I get a lot of these. Here are a few of my favorites. I'm a bit heavy set, and I was at a friend's wedding which was predominantly Filipino. Anyways, I was in line at the dessert buffet, and two of the people I was sitting with asked me to get them food as well. So I had 3 plates in my hand as I was waiting to get served, and 2 Filipino ladies behind me said in Tagalog, "Look at this fat guy, he's going to eat everything before we get there." I chuckled and shook my head. I didn't bother confronting them, since I have a bunch of aunties that would probably do the same thing. I was helping a Filipino co-worker pick up some furniture she bought from a patio furniture place. Since I owned a truck she asked if I could help her. During this time everyone had Nextels, and you could do that direct connect thing that made the phones act like walkie-talkies. So she direct connects her husband telling her we're on our way. He replies back in Tagalog, "Don't let your co-worker in the house, he might steal something." Now this being on the speakerphone I heard the whole thing and she knew I spoke Tagalog and understood. Her face turned bright red and started yelling at her husband, "You stupid idiot, he speaks Tagalog." When we get to the house he acts like nothing happened, even invites me in for a beer. I politely said no thanks and helped my coworker unload the truck. She kept apologizing, she was so embarrassed. I was at Disneyland one time and we were on Main Street standing in the crowd waiting for the parade to go by. There is a section roped off in the for handicapped people. I noticed there was a Filipino family in front of us, with a middle-aged man in a wheelchair taking up the front row. As the parade started, the man in the wheelchair got up and walked forward to get a better view. One of the older women started yelling at him in Tagalog and told him to sit back down or he would blow their cover. Apparently they got the wheelchair so they could cut in line and get special treatment. Edit, grammar and spelling. My wife is fluent in Japanese, and when she was 16 she lived in Japan as a student, but she's a New England wasp, blonde hair, blue eyes, and busty, so the expectation among the locals was that she only spoke American. And the Japanese talked all kind of shit about her in front of her. Businessmen talking about her boobs, a grown mother on the subway talking about how American women need to cross their legs when they said because they smell, etc. Finally she gets so fed up with this, she asks a kid in her school how to say fuck you in Japanese. Kid replies, "We don't really have the words for that." Wife insists, "Surely they must have something." Kid says, "Okay, say this." Now armed, wife waits for the right moment. She's on the train. Businessman says something about her. She turns and says those words. Businessman immediately blanches and gets off at the next stop. Wife thinks, "This is amazing," and starts using it everywhere. Finally, her homestay sister is with her. Wife uses the phrase on some kid calling her Gaijin, and homestay sister freaks out. "Do you know what you just said?" "Yes, I said fuck you to that kid." "No," says her homestay sister. "You just told that kid you were going to rap him." TLDR. 16 years old girl threatens to rap most of Tokyo. Went to Pakistan for my cousin's wedding 2 years ago. I was 24 at the time. I'm born and raised first generation American. I can comprehend and speak Hindi and Urdu. Mother is Pakistani, father is Indian. The whole time I pretended I didn't know what my family was saying because I wanted to see what their true feelings were about me. It wasn't good. For 3 weeks, the gist of what I heard is she's too fat. Why isn't she married yet? She is getting too old to be married. She is too spoiled. She doesn't need an education. Mind you, most of my mother's side of the family, excluding my mother, was married at a very young age, and usually within the family. Yep, cousins marrying cousins. None of them are happy with their marriages, aren't free to live life for themselves, and have at least 3 to 4 children. The last night we were there, we had a huge family dinner. Fast forward to dessert, we were sitting on the floor in 2 rows of probably 30 people in each row. My mother and I were sitting at the 2 ends of the rows, because it was an hour honor and we were leaving in a few hours. My mom was saying her goodbyes, and asked me a question in Urdu. I replied back in Urdu, and at that moment everyone's head snapped around, and their eyes almost fell out of their skulls. This is where my mom realizes what happened for the last 3 weeks, and is in hysterics rolling around on the ground laughing uncontrollably. People still to this day, whenever they come to America, are overly gracious when they come to visit. 2 stories with 2 different languages. I'm mixed with 2 types of Asian. My friends call it double Asian, and natively speak Vietnamese. I'm jetting my toes done with my sister in California and speak English to her/the employees the entire time we're there. 2 of the nail ladies start talking about me in Vietnamese, trying to figure out what nationality I am. They decided Japanese, which is wrong, so I surprised them when I spoke up in Viet and said that no, I'm not Japanese, I'm just mixed. They stopped talking for a little while after that. TLDR, the ladies at the nail salon probably are talking about you. Just kidding. Kind of. I also took 8 years of Spanish and was pretty good at it. I just moved to a new city in the Midwest, so I went to Walmart to buy a ton of apartment sheet. So there's little ol' me with a cart full of small appliances, cleaning supplies, you name it. 2 Hispanic guys get behind me in the checkout line, which made it awkward for me because I felt bad that I had so much sheets to check out. So the cashier finishes ringing me up. It comes to like $300 or something. One Hispanic guy turns to the other and tells him how much I spent. It wasn't like they were talking shit, but it still bothered me a little. It's not your business how much I spend on stuff. TLDR, I also speak enough Spanish to know when people are talking about me. I'm an American of mostly Irish and Italian heritage from a not so diverse area, but I'm conversationally fluent in Spanish. When I was the pledge master for my college fraternity, 2 of our pledges, from Guatemala and Puerto Rico started talking shit about some of the older fraternity brothers in Spanish in the back of the room during their pledge class mandatory study hall one night. They had no clue that I knew exactly what they were saying. I sat there and listened for a while until one of them switched the topic to questions about some homework in my major, information systems. While the other was thinking of the answer, I answered the question in fluent Spanish, without any accent. That would indicate I'm not a native speaker. The room went dead silent as every other pledge began looking between those two and me. I gave my best evil smile as I watched those two babble out apologies in a mixture of Spanish and English. As punishment for their disrespect, I gave them a couple hours of extra community service on top of their required hours mandated by our pledge education program, and advised them to never air grievances about other brothers in public, no matter the language being spoken. One went on to be my successor as pledge master, one of the best the chapter has had in years, when I was elected chapter vice president, and the other became chairman of the Brotherhood Committee, tasked with finding ways to facilitate bonding, togetherness, and respect in the chapter. I never heard them utter another bad word about another brother in public ever again, in any language. Yes, it has happened to me a few times. I lived in the doctor for a few years, and have spoken Spanish for half my life now, so I usually know pretty well what's going on. It happened to me the other day at a yard sale. However, there is a funnier/more horrible story to tell that is not my own. One of my friends in the doctor lived in Arizona for 16 years or so her English was pretty much perfect. She didn't flaunt it though. She used it only when necessary. She invited these two missionaries from the US over to her house that had made a habit of speaking English without considering those around them, you know. She was trying to be nice to these guys that were far away from home, etc. They didn't know she spoke English. Her and her husband were making them ribs for dinner. They were commenting on how overweight the two cooks were, how gross Dominican food was, and just being generally insensitive and rude. Well, my friend gets incensed and just turns around and starts screaming, "You motherfucker, get the fuck out of my house, go fuck yourselves." These two kids were totally floored and embarrassed and apologized profusely, but to no avail. The hope is that they learned as bratty Americans to not be complete douche nozzles to people who go way out of their way to accommodate for them. Yeah, in my first weeks working as IT manager in the Comcast Technical Support Center in Mexico, it was pretty common to me to find people speaking in English and immediately switching to Spanish as they saw me, giant German, speaking in English all the time with everyone. I looked like an outsider from the main office visiting the facilities, which happens really often, but I have been living in the north of Mexico since I was 6, so I know Spanish and English too. In this place almost the 80% of the agents are illegal immigrants who were deported from the USA back to Mexico. A big part of them were in jail for different things, usually related with drugs or violence, but all they care here is their English to be understandable. Anyways, one day I was riding the elevator to my office when a guy and a girl went in speaking in English. As they saw me, they go quiet and then they start talking in Spanish. The girl says, "Of course it smells. You can't hide it right away." He replies, "No, I don't smell. I had perfume in my car. You maybe don't smell it because you're used to it, but I can smell you, and I bet me smells it too." "No, shut up. I don't smell." There was a very strong smell of weed and cheap perfume in that elevator. I was quiet all the way until the elevator arrived to my floor. I smiled at them. Just before leaving, I told them in Spanish, "Yes, you do smell. I think I'm a little high now. Have a good day." They just stood there quiet as the elevator closed again. Sadly, it's my obligation as staff to report it to the security dept, so they run drug tests on the agents, which is also pretty common. I don't know if they got the guy. Outsiders visiting us always joke this place looks like a rehab center. Next time super nice a Comcast support agent from Mexico called George is greeting you for choosing Comcast and wishing you to have a great week, it's safe to imagine a shaved head homie called George with the arms, neck and head tattooed is in the other side of the line. Most of them are great people. Others keep thinking they're the big deal because of their past in the USA. Oh, I've been waiting so long to tell this story. I'm an American. I look straight Italian or Spanish. I took all 4 years of French in high school. As a reward for completing the program and maintaining a 95% average in French class all years, we were given a 1-week trip to France. So I was 17 and went on a class trip to France. Most locals in big cities in France speak English. Well, we took the TGV to a village in Auvergne. The little hotel we stayed at was informed we were American students. That's all they were told. Nothing more. When we were walking the halls, we mainly spoke English. It's just easier. We soon learned that the hotel staff talks so much shit about us. It was mostly about how messy we are, how we are entitled, spoiled, arrogant Americans. We overheard them yelling from room to room when doing housekeeping, things like, "Oh my god, it's like their parents never taught these brats how to clean. Their clothes smell like a cow shat on them. Hey ladies, come look. The fat blonde one brought a 2-piece swimsuit. I didn't know they made their size." The response was something about, "In America, of course they do," which I'll admit is true. This continued for the 4 days we were there, and we all came to the conclusion that we just weren't going to say anything yet. The day we were packing up, we decided to fuck with them. They were walking the halls making comments as usual, and we slowly began saying, letting on to the fact that we spoke French. Someone muttered "chien" under her breath, which means beach. The French lady said to the other worker something like "AWW, this one knows a bit of French. It's cute." That's when someone decided to let them know. She just casually said, "You guys know that we are French honor students, right? We're all fluent." Someone else decided to add, "And you're all terrible people." Their faces. I can't even. Ugh. I taught in Changchun, China for a while, and while my Chinese isn't the greatest, it is definitely passable about 75% of the time. This story concludes with the grossest thing that has ever happened to me. I'm a city bus going back to my apartment. It's rush hour, so it's standing room only. I'm standing next to these 2 older Chinese guys, and we are positioned so we are kind standing toward one another. Since I'm a 6'2" white guy, they were immediately talking about me, mostly trying to deduce where I was from. They concluded that I was Russian and I probably didn't speak any Chinese. They were speaking fast, so it was hard for me to really understand them. I shrugged and I said, "Woshi mi guoran," which is, "I'm American." They stare at me, their mouths open and kind of in shock. Not sure how to respond, I give a little wave and say, "Ni-hey-o." In the middle of the ow part of that, when my mouth is open, ik now to make that ow sound, one of the dudes suddenly, and violently, sneezes. He literally sneezed into my mouth while it was open. I gagged, starting spitting everywhere, and yelled as loud as I could, "Stop the faking bus." The bus driver, confused about why the foreigner was suddenly angry and yelling, stops the bus. I push past everyone, leave the bus, spitting the entire time. I'm pretty sure I drank like a gallon of mouthwash that night. I'm gagging just thinking about all that old man snot/spittle that flew right in my mouth. Just, the taste. The dude was smoker, for sure. I have to live with that forever. That was the last time I ever took the bus while in China. I always paid extra to take the cab, because I'm worth it. Damn it, shit was gross. So over the summer a few years ago I worked at a local hookah cafe that was run by 2 lovely Arab men from Brazil of all places. They hired me because I was Turkish and knew the culture. Now every so often there would be some people who would come in to bother them or me, and I'd tell them that the owners were cousins of mine, so they thought I spoke Arabic, not Turkish, which got around the returning customers. Lo and behold, one night, the one group of Russian Turks in the whole town came in and started saying stuff in Turkish and Russian. Side note, I had a few Russian boyfriends, so I've still got some familiarity with Russian as well as being fluent in Turkish and quickly picking up Arabic. So I go to check up on them once their hookah is delivered, and they are throwing cushions around everywhere and have hidden the TV remote. They're blathering on in Turkish, and I catch a few sentences that pretty much are explaining in detail how they like to do very sexually explicit things to me and other ladies in the cafe. My first reaction is to leave and tell the owners exactly what they said, which I do. Conversation goes like this: there are some Turkish guys up there who are being very sexually repulsive. Owner 1, they're what? Owner 2, how do you know? Me, well they are saying it in Turkish and obviously they don't know that I'm Turkish. Owner 2, and this is why I miss these guys. Well, how do you want us to handle it? We can kick them out or you can, if you want. Me, well the shock's worn off a little, and I'm feeling angry. How about I go back up there and tell them to leave? The owners at this point know where I'm going with this and move a little closer to the upper portion of the cafe to provide manpower if necessary. When I get back up there all of them are still being rude and very disgusting for lack of a better word. Me, in English, how is your hookah? Turk 1, in English, still tasting okay. In Turkish, when will the beach shut up? Doesn't she know we could bend her over right now? Turk 2, in Turkish to Turk 1, who that'd be fun. We should get the girl down there to come up too. Me, in Turkish, well I don't know about that, she seems really nice. Someone might start a fight over that, and my fiance wouldn't like that very much. All jaws drop. Me, in Turkish, before all of you disgusting pigs get out you are going to fix the mess you made. You are no longer welcome in this cafe again. They all get really meek and fix the couches before they leave and apologize on their way out. Never have I felt so powerful in my life. It was nice. I may be a bit late for the party and I'm probably at the bottom of this comment pile already. But whatever, here goes nothing. Alright, a little background on myself. So my father is Lebanese and my mother is Korean, making me fairly Asian looking, eyes, hair, etc. But I grew up in an Arab country and was raised with a majority Lebanese upbringing. I was at a Model United Nations conference in New York with my school a few years ago when during the break I was heading up to my hotel room to have my lunch up there. Conference was happening in the same hotel we stayed in. As I got into the elevator a group of Muslim girls wearing hijabs came into the elevator and began speaking in Arabic. Now this isn't something strange to me coming from an Arab culture / background, but being in New York they obviously didn't expect many others to be speaking Arabic around them, especially not the Asian looking guy in the elevator with them. Now as the elevator ascended to the upper floors, the girls were giggling and laughing and cracking jokes, while I stayed fairly neutral and subdued about the whole situation. Then come to around the 12th floor the door opens, and one of the girls mistakenly steps out thinking it was their floor, and proceeds to get laughed at by her friends, one of whom yelled aloud something along the lines of "You faking idiot. We've told you like 15 times what floor we are on," to which everyone began laughing about on the elevator. Naturally, I let out a chuckle at the comment. That was when the same girl who had made the comment said aloud, "Look at this Chinese guy, laughing as though he understands what we are saying. He's probably going upstairs to look for chopsticks to eat his noodles for lunch." That was when I instantly turned around and said in my Arabic accent, "I do understand. I do speak Arabic. Probably better than you do. And no, unless you're willing to share some with me, I won't be eating noodles." It was at that exact moment that every single one of those girls went red. They all just stared at the floor and went bright tomato red. And the girl who had made the comment began apologizing profusely. They could not believe I could speak Arabic, and better yet with such fluency. It was a funny experience for myself. I got off the elevator on the next stop and spent the rest of the afternoon laughing about it and telling the story to my friends. TLDR, Asian gets on an elevator. Surprise, I'm Arab. Doesn't get noodles. I'm not fully bilingual. I know enough German to get by in a short conversation. Well, I was about 23 and working at a Best Buy in North Dakota selling cameras when a family comes in with their teenage daughter and teenage German exchange student. Both were probably about 16 or 17. I'm not really into jailbait, but they were definitely attractive young women. So they are looking for a digital camera for the host student's upcoming trip to Germany, and I'm showing them ones that would probably be a good match for her. I'm mostly selling it to the parents. All she cares about is that it will take nice pictures and that it's cute, meaning some kind of pink colored body. I'm showing them a nice little Canon ELPH that I think would be a perfect fit since it takes great pictures, is a decent price, and comes in hot pink. The two girls, the German girl in particular, begin talking in German to each other about how hot they think I am. I'm showing off the camera's features. The American girl is wearing a bright color shirt, so I use that to demo color accent. So now she wants to model for me. The German girl joins in and leans on the counter with her arms crossed low to accentuate her cleavage. Meanwhile they're still talking in German about me being cute and wanting to tease me. Eventually she's standing right next to me and she positions herself so I'll have an over-the-shoulder view of her cleavage. At first I didn't notice until she accidentally bumped me while adjusting her top by pulling the front way out, giving me a full view of her bare breasts. I was actually pretty shocked at how brazenly she did it, like some pro-level stealth flashing. Like some kind of German boob ninja. Eventually they decide on the camera and buy it. As they're leaving I give the German girl a smile and a wink and say, Guten Abend. Dank für den Einkauf mit Best Buy. Tschüss. Both girls' jaws just drop and their faces turn bright red as they realize that not only did I understand every word they said about me, but I've been onto their little game from the very beginning. I'm a white dude who can speak Xhosa. While not completely unheard of in South Africa, a white person who speaks something other than English or Afrikaans is quite strange. Just after school, I took a gap year. I scraped together enough money to go to London to seek my fortune. One day whilst I was there, I was sitting on a bus back to my house when 3 black ladies got on. They sat down in the seats in front of me and immediately launched into a thorough dressing down of all the people around them. Commenting, in Xhosa, of course, on people's clothes and hair etc. Now, Xhosa idioms are both hilarious and descriptive, so when they started commenting on a clearly very inebriated gentleman, I laughed quite loudly in appreciation. They turned around and looked at me with suspicion, but I pretended to be laughing at my phone. I was enjoying the small taste of home, and I didn't want them to know I was eavesdropping. They turned back to each other, and one of them said, in Xhosa, does this Mlungu, derogatory term for white man, know what we are saying? The others immediately said that there was no chance, because they were overseas and hardly any white people speak Xhosa in South Africa, let alone England. They carried on with their conversation, but this time with some subtle jabs at me to see if I'd react. I kept my cool until we came to my stop. I got up, walked past them, turned around and told them in no uncertain terms, in clear and properly pronounced Xhosa, that I had heard every word that they had said, and that I thought they should be ashamed of themselves. I got off the bus, and could still hear the shrill cries of the Xhosa exclamation ahu 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 over the noise of the bus driving away. It was delicious. First off, me and my brother speak multiple languages. A few years ago we went to Reykjavik, Iceland, and of course went out drinking over the weekend. We just entered the bar, speaking Danish. I ask where we can put our coats. Within 2 seconds this girl ecstatically asks if we are Danish, to which we just reply yes, for simplicity's sake. She turns around to her friend and screams they are Danish. We are gonna fuck Danish guys tonight. The next 45 minutes were hilarious. It was all about which one of us each one would bang, whether they would swap, whose house they would take us to, and whether our such words were in Danish. I figured it was in the bag. Nope. No sir. Life faked me over. I went to the bathroom, and as I'm taking a leak, 2 locations get into a crazy fight while I'm peeing. The bouncers rush in and all 3 of us get kicked out. I plead him to let me in, and that I'm not even from Iceland, but he doesn't care at all. It's December, and he won't let me get my jacket on Iceland in December. I end up calling my cousin, who drives me home, where I eat instant noodles and canned tuna before falling asleep. My brother proceeded to go home with both girls, not caring whether I freeze to death or not. TLDR, brother and I heard Icelandic girls talk about finally faking Danish guys. Proceeded to get cock blocked by 2 locals in a fight. Brother banged both girls. I ate crappy noodles and canned tuna. Awkward. And kinda unique. White guy in Korea getting into a taxi in the dead of winter at night. I'm all bundled up because it's really flipping cold and snowing. That is, my hat is over my ears and my muffler is covering my nose. I ask the cab driver to take me to my house in Korean. I speak pretty good since I have to speak it for work, but not fluently. The cab driver, apparently a refined gentleman, catches my accent and assumes I'm Japanese and starts talking to me in Japanese, how he is studying it, etc. I do have a Japanese accent when I speak Korean, since I learned it before my Korean and I guess it's very distinctive. However, no one has actually mistaken me for a Japanese guy until this moment, since it was dark and I'm all bundled up. So I admit to being Japanese out of awkwardness and I compliment his Japanese, but try to get back to Korean, because they are easy to confuse for me when I'm tired. The cab driver then criticizes Japan and Japanese territorial claims and I just kinda listen and not argue, counting the minutes until we reach my house. He kinda gets more incensed about it and how tensions are high and it's getting more awkward by the second. He tells me how I need to be Japan's ambassador here and go back to Japan to tell them to respect Korea's history and victims. I kinda shoot back that both sides need to come together and get over the past. This does not go over well. Finally we reach my house and I can't get the money out fast enough. As a parting shot, he says, in English, "Thank you boy, goodbye, fact sheet." My friend's mom is white, but fluent in Spanish due to marrying a guy from Mexico and living there for a short time. Anyway, in high school she picked us up at the local transit station, and as she came, she saw us verbally arguing with this cholo looking dude who was about 5 feet 6, but thick and covered in tattoos. Pretty stereotypical cholo, if you ask me. We were arguing because my friend looked at him, and apparently it was the wrong way to look at him. Whatever. So we walked back to my friend's mom's car as he's still spouting off trash talk when he starts talking Spanish to us. The only word I understood is madre, which means mom. I assume he said something bad because it made her get out of her car and go full blown badass on him. This guy is 5 feet 6 and thick, covered in tattoos, looks like a gangster, maybe in his mid-20s. My friend's mom was about 5 feet 7, just a little less thick than the cholo, had her hair in a bun, was wearing sandals, white pants, glasses, and some cashmere short or something. She looked like a nice lady is the point. My friend's mom stepped out of the car and immediately went off on this guy in Spanish and English all the way until her face was damn near against his. She said a lot of curse words. My friend said she threatened to kill the cholo in Spanish if he ever did this again. It was loud and surprising. The cholo guy's face was shocked, his eyes opened up, and his jaw dropped when she started going off at him, and when she finished he put his head down and walked away. I found out from my friend the guy said in Spanish, this is what got his mom out of the car. He said he would beat her in front of the mom then fuck her. I assume he said that because he saw her car pull up. She wasn't having that shit. Oh yeah, I forgot to add to my post, Chipotle lady. One day my girlfriend, Asian, and I, white looking Mexican, go to get Chipotle down the street from our college dorm and barely make it in time, like 10 minutes before closing. The doors are still open, and as we get in line one of the workers tells us we're too late. As we are turning around, her boss overrides her and tells her we're on time, so she scoffs loudly and makes our burritos. But not before talking total shit in Spanish the entire time about how spoiled college kids like me are, expecting to always be served like kings, etc. Just really stupid comments directed at me and my girlfriend. I was a mixture of upset and amused the entire time, that is until we get to pay, and she literally shouts out in Spanish. I knew he wouldn't pay for her. And by now the guy at the register basically tells her to STFU, since he realizes that I understood the whole thing. What gave it away was when my girlfriend, totally unaware the whole time, asks me where do you want to eat. Novio. Novio equals boyfriend. Quickly, I feel the entire staff has eyes on me, and the lady shuts up. As we walk home, I tell my girlfriend everything, translating word by word. She flips out pretty hard, but when we get home, her roommate is gone for the weekend and we happily munch our burritos, make biracial babies, and forget about the Chipotle lady. This story is of my brother actually. So we hail from Kerala in South India, but settled in Bangalore, Karnataka. He and a friend suddenly decided to dye their hair white, but the stylist goofed, and his hair turned bright orange. With his dark complexion and short curly orange hair, he looked more like someone with roots in Africa. Around this time, the team he was managing decided to go to Kerala to do a trip on the famous houseboats, and invited him along as he was the only one that spoke Malayalam, local language of the state of Kerala. They start the 8 to 10 hour drive in the night and then sometime early in the morning, stop at a small roadside restaurant in a tiny village. As soon as he gets out of the van, all the locals stare, because no one there would have ever seen a 140 kilograms, yup, he was obese, African guy with bright orange hair. Soon they realized no one in the group seemed to know Malayalam. My brother didn't talk yet, and they got brazen. They started commenting in Malayalam on my brother's weight, hair, and generally wondered what he would eat. They even apparently sent one of the waiters to call other people to come and gawk. Finally, when it was time to order, they started to take the orders in broken English and lot of gesturing. That's when my brother spoke in clear Malayalam asking what was on the menu. The waiters and restaurant owners' eyes almost popped out of the sockets. And then he continued with asking the route, etc. The people were so amazed that they spent the next 10 minutes asking him how an African learned such fluent Malayalam. They were even more amazed to learn that not only was he not African, but he was in fact a local. I believe he got a sizable discount on their bill that day. All the time. I pass for white, but I'm 100% of Mexican descent, born in Texas. Spanish was my first language, by a few days, or so I'm told. I have more stories than I can count. I'm short, so they were mostly bullies, people mocking me to their friends, calling me queer, tiny, etc. But if you pretend not to understand, you'll catch all sorts of things. Old ladies talking about my balls, old men laughing about my long hair, the occasional girls egging one another on to go talk to me, gay guys checking out my ass, not to mention stuff that isn't about you, people cheating on their partners, admitting to embarrassing illnesses, stealing, or drug use, mocking other people, private business matters, etc. One of my memorable stories, while I was a new teacher in a village in Peru, a little old Peruvian lady sold two men sitting near me 2 sandwiches and a cup of coffee apiece for 4.5 sols. I had been considering sitting at a different spot when she shooed them away and asked me over. I sat down and she asked me if I wanted a sandwich and coffee. I declined the coffee but pointed wordlessly at the pot of hot water so I could have tea with my sandwich. In an aside to her daughter, who was staring at me, long hair, don't care, she offhandedly said, probably American. She charged me 5 sols for the single sandwich. I asked her in fluent Spanish if my money was less valuable than theirs, paid, and left, politely yet firmly promising not to eat at her booth next time. When she found out I was the new teacher in town, she proceeded to woo me back with free coffee and hot chocolate until the balance was paid off, which was nice. She was one of my favorite people in town after that. I'd buy her sandwiches and chocolate almost every morning. I've got a story along those lines. I'm ding one night bringing a few people home, including friend 1, we'll call him Mark, friend 2, we'll call him Bill, and the cousin of a third friend, not involved in the story, and we'll call her Emma. Now after a night in the bar, Mark is clearly going to bring Emma back home and do his thing. As we're driving back, Bill devises this plan to come up with an excuse to drop them off by themselves under the guise that we'd be going to get Taco Bell and might bring them back some, even though it was after 2 AM and Taco Bell was closed. He wants to explain this to me in the car, even though he's sitting right next to Mark and Emma. He asks me if he could speak to me about it in French. Now I took many years of French in school, but really struggled with it, to the point where I was relatively useless in trying to decipher it. Not to mention, Bill was drunk and slurring anyway, so I maybe understood 5-10% of what he was saying at best. After a couple more times of trying to re-explain it to me, I tell him not to bother, I can't understand him. At this point, Emma turns to Bill. Emma, were you trying to talk to him in French? Bill, yeah. Why, do you speak it? Emma, it was my minor. Now fortunately, she was pretty drunk and not listening anyway, so it didn't seem like she heard the conversation, or if she did, she didn't care, but I laughed the rest of the night of the notion that Bill had tried to explain to me in French this plan for Mark and Emma to be left alone, even though I barely comprehend the language, while the woman he's trying to hide it from pretty much mastered the language. I'm a white American living in Korea. I get this just about every day. Sometimes it's even a bit surprising. My former school was for super rich kindergartners, even one actor's son. I even had a kid miss picture day due to her mom's plastic surgeon warning her not to go outside that week because the cold weather would ruin her newest surgery. I'm not a skinny gal even by American standards, so I've always been pretty worried about how these super skinny Korean mums view me. They would always talk right in front of me to our assistant manager, as if I weren't right there. Usually it was about my teaching style and methods, nothing big, and with the exception of one insane mom, most comments were complimentary. Then one day, a mom came in for her son's birthday party. They made me pose with the kids to get a picture, and I was surprised to hear the mom talk about how photogenic I was. Happy day. Probably the most surprising event occurred on the subway just a couple weeks ago. These two men from Cameroon were talking in French about what they wanted to do to my fat ass. In my experience, men from Africa are much more forgiving to us larger ladies. Anyway, I eventually talked to them for a while and declined many invitations to join them as well as requests for my phone number. When we arrived at my stop, I switched to French for a few sentences and politely say goodbye. Only one of them seemed to realize what that meant. I live in Seattle. I have Mexican neighbors. I grew up in New Mexico, took 5 years of Spanish in high school, and minored in Spanish in college. My neighbors do not know this. We have large trees along the property line that they approached us about taking down when we first bought the house. They claimed the trees were screwing up their DirecTV signal. We said thanks, but no thanks. We like the trees. A few years later there was a huge windstorm and a branch hit their house, which, if we want to get technical, is probably built way too close to the property line. I called my insurance, and they said no fault, act of God, that's what their homeowner's insurance is for. I get off the phone and minutes later the father, who speaks zero English, came over with his brother-in-law to translate. My wife answered the door, and I heard my neighbor say, "Oh Jesus, I don't want to talk to the woman. Tell her to go get a stupid husband." The brother-in-law carefully translated, "Can we please speak to your husband?" I walk up and ask if I can help them. They explain that a branch hit the house, etc. So I say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm too stupid to handle things like this. Let me go get my wife." My wife also took Spanish in HS and college, so knew what was happening. It was sweet. We kept trading back and forth for a little bit before I produced the letter in Spanish. I had our insurance company MLS explaining the whole situation. As they walked away my wife says, "Mil disculpas, una suit con la casa. Adios." Edit. Words. It's happened to me a few times, but not in the manner that I think often most people expect. I'm Korean, but an American citizen since I was a wee lad, and my English, not to toot my own horn, toot toot, it's exemplary anyways. In some small podunk towns in the Midwest, I've sometimes been silent for whatever reason during transactions with cashiers, and sometimes they assume I can't speak English. Rarely do they say anything disparaging. Usually their eyes just kinda light up once I say something, and the light bulb in their head clicks on, and they're all like, "Oh, this guy speaks English like a white person, now he's a-okay in my book." And then they get overly polite. It's weird. Edit. To expand upon this, I've worked in a factory environment for most of my adult life, though I'm currently in R&D tech in a metallurgy lab, so I'm in the office most of the time nowadays, such as right now, and most of the guys in the shop have mouths like sailors. Many of the older guys have some sort of racist ideology to one extent or another as well. Over the years I've kinda just gotten used to it and brush it off, understanding that the older generation grew up and lived during a period of time where casual racism was a bit more acceptable than it is nowadays. Point is, the small handful of racist dudes working won't actually say racist shit to your face if you're not white, but will totally say all sorts of shit to other white people when the non-whites aren't present. But the weirdest thing happens with me, since my English is about as naturally American as it gets. These racist dudes, once they get to know me even a little bit, for some reason feel comfortable enough to drop their facade and throw out the racist comments left and right, as if because I talk like them, I therefore must share their opinions on blacks and Mexicans too. The shit I hear these guys say, man, and it's like, what, did you guys forget that I'm not white or something? That maybe this comes off as a bit ignorant and rude to me. That's also pretty weird example. Before I got my current position as a lab tech, I was a welder/fabricator. At the time I had a partner, a white guy. Cool sheet anyways. He would often ponder aloud about some things he didn't understand about other races. For example, he told me once that, and I'm not bullshitting here, black women have bigas because of genetics. After centuries of women sitting on their as weaving baskets in their huts, theirs began to change from generation to generation into the big ol' badunka dunks that many black women possess today. Yeah, I couldn't make that up if I tried. I know I'm late to the party, but this is something that is actually appropriate for once. I'm English but have Canadian heritage, so every summer I work at this summer camp, the main focus of which is canoeing, and in particular canoe tripping. This typically means going out into the Canadian bush for however many days at a time, paddling the canoes across lakes, and portaging between them. Anyway, I was working there last year and I get put on a trip which was to be about 9 days long, and besides myself, they were all girls, which is actually fine. Normally they aren't that hardcore about tripping, so I was ready for a chill time. Turns out there were 2 girls from Quebec, French speaking part of Canada, and no one knew French. Apart from me, I had spent a year living in France at a very young age, so picked it up very quickly and then continued to study it to the point where it wasn't noticeable that I was foreign. When I went to France, every day in the canoe they would talk about the most outrageous shit, like the parties they went to, the guys they slept with, the guys they wanted to sleep with, how much they hated all the other girls on the trip, and also how much one of them wanted to bang me. Obviously I didn't act on that, as I would have lost my job, but right at the end of the trip, on the bus back, I told them to maybe include everyone else in your little conversation, because they were going at it again. Never will I ever see a brighter shade of scarlet again. I think the looks were priceless. I used to work for Irish name Auto Parts. I have many stories, but this one stands out the most in recent memory. My first name is as white as they come. I don't look Hispanic, but I am. I speak it fluently. A couple of Pacers came in looking for a starter and battery for his Pacer mobile. While I'm looking up the part numbers, I hear the one friend tell the other guy, just try this, and if it doesn't fix the problem, or it burns this starter out too, bring it back, and tell them that the car was sold, and you just need the money back. The other guy decides that this is a good idea, and also asks for the alternator. He asks me, can we return these parts? I replied, only if you don't install them. Once you do, they belong to you. The entire purchase comes to be over $400. I rang them through and made a note to leave on my manager's desk, outlining the situation. A few days later, the guys come back through the door and drop parts on the counter. The unmistakable smell of burnt copper wiring is coming from the starter box. They tell me we didn't install, we just sold that car. I mustered the biggest shit-eating grin I could muster and told them clearly, usted no pude regresa restas pisas por un reembolso. Se close instalo, ahora, saldi mi tienda, por favor. The look on their faces was absolutely priceless. Yes. Total white guy here, fluent in Spanish. I used to work at Nordstrom, so I'd wear a suit into work. I got in the elevator one morning along with another white girl who worked there. She was very pretty and was also dressed really nice. We were joined by a couple of Hispanic housekeeping workers from the mall. One guy, one girl. On the ride down, the guy started talking about how hot the white girl was and about all the stuff he would do to her. He was getting pretty graphic, but the Hispanic lady just kind of rolled her eyes and I just kept it to myself, thinking all along of what a prick this guy was. I figured what the white girl didn't know wouldn't hurt her, and I also didn't want to have to explain to her what he was saying either. However, he then started talking about me and how I thought I was so cool in my fancy suit and how I was probably just a big bussy and he could easily take me on. Basically kind of ripping on white people in general and how we feel superior to Hispanics. Just when I was about to say something, the door opened where the white girl and I were getting off. I was going to let it go, but he just made it too easy for me. Right as I walked off he said something to the effect of, see, he looks tough, but he's just running off and won't even defend himself. Right then I turned around, looked him dead in the eyes, and said, Kidado, hombre basically, watch it, bro right as the elevator doors closed. I'll never forget the look on his face as his jaw dropped and he realized that I had understood everything he just said. And the girl he was with, her jaw dropped as well, and I could hear her laughing uncontrollably as the elevator door shut and it continued down to the floors below. I'm sure she didn't let him live that one down for a while. As far as the white girl goes, I simply told her I defended her honor, and then we dated. A long time ago, I spent several years as a co-director of an outdoor science camp for middle school students from rural Oregon. I was also conversationally fluent in Russian at the time. One of the school districts we worked with was located in Woodburn, which has a very large population of people who came over from various Soviet republics and settled in the United States during the 1980s. About a dozen kids from these families would attend our outdoor science camp. The second year of the camp, I was leading a group of about 20 kids, including 4 Russian-speaking girls. Their English was in 8th grade, and the other 3 were in 7th grade, and as middle school-aged girls have a tendency to do, they were sort of chattering to themselves the entire time I was leading the group around through various activities. They were complaining about their nails getting chipped, which of the boys in the camp were cute, how boring the learning projects were, etc etc etc. Typically middle school girl stuff. Then they started talking about me. My hair was boring, my taste in music sucked, how I had an obvious crush on another instructor, and a few other things I'm sure middle school girls typically say about their teachers. I let them go on for much of the morning, but just before breaking for lunch, in the middle of a wrap-up conversation about what we learned in the morning and how we would prepare for the afternoon, I sort of side-slipped from English to Russian and said something like this. Pardon me, young ladies, but could you please pay attention? I have enjoyed overhearing your conversations all morning, and if you would like, I would be happy to practice speaking Russian with you this afternoon and tomorrow. My language skills are not that great. And for the record, I do not have a crush on anyone currently in our outdoor science camp. But I'm sure all of us would appreciate your kind attention this afternoon. This work requires all of our help. And then I switched back to English, apologized to the other kids for the interruption, and then carried on with what I was saying. I have never forgotten the looks on their faces. They would not have been more flabbergasted if the damn trees had started talking to them. The best part was that the 4 of them turned into some of the most involved kids we had. I guess I destroyed their opportunity to be cool in front of everyone else, so they turned back to being kids and playing around. But that trick never worked again. The next year, and every year thereafter, one of the kids from Woodburn would come up to me and say, in Russian, something like "You're that reluctant cynic. We heard about you." I'm in Agra in India, home to the Taj Mahal, and have spent the day wandering around with an Indian Australian girl and her white Australian boyfriend. I'd met them on the sleeper train the night before. We are tired, sat on the platform floor waiting for a high-speed train back to Delhi, and minding our own business and getting ignored, which suits us just fine. Along comes this Sikh guy who must have been 70 years old easily. He's doubled over with a walking stick, shuffling along the platform until he sees us. He straightens up, gets seriously agitated and much shouting in, presumably, Hindi and waving of the stick ensues. Some other Sikhs walk past. He shouts at them whilst pointing at us. They ignore him. A guy pushing a small food stall goes past. More shouting and pointing ensues. The stall guy is also disinterested, but this guy is attracting a crowd due to his persistence. Eventually, the Aussie girl jumps up, starts shouting at him, and pointing her finger at him. In seconds he goes from an irate angry old man to this cow-beaten sorrowful shadow of a confused old guy and shuffles away with half the platform trying hard not to laugh. I asked her what that was about. It turns out he assumed we were British. I am. They were Aussie, and it was personally our fault what the British had done 200 years ago. We admittedly did bad things to India, but before my time. He wanted the Sikhs to use their Kirp and daggers to kill us for what our ancestors did. He wanted the food stall trader to poison us for the same reason. She jumped up, scolded him for assuming she couldn't understand him. She looked proper Indian yo, and told him that we were Australian. She was Indian. The Brits had done much the same thing to Australia, kinda true, and that he should bugger off and find some real Brits to harass. Cue much stifled laughter from an audience of 200 odd people. I'm American, but my parents and family are Israeli, and I go there every year, even living there for a while, when I was in middle school. I'm fluent in Hebrew. As a teenager in Israel, I went out a lot. Clubbing, partying on the beach, etc. It was a lot of fun. I found that girls were more interested in talking to me if they knew I was American. Israelis love Americans, it's just a fact. One summer when I was 14, I had a fling with this 17 over 18-year-old Israeli girl. She had no idea I spoke Hebrew. I was there for 2 months, and we met within the first couple weeks, so we ended up going out for about a month and a half while I was there. It was perfect. I would hang out with her, and her friends and her friends and her would always talk about me right in front of me. I always knew if I was doing something wrong, or what was the right thing to do. I felt like I was Mel Gibson in What Do Women Want, but the Jewish version. I know Mel would hate that. 3/4 of the way through the summer, I accidentally blew my cover. She had been learning English at school and wanted to take some proficiency test for a program she was applying to. She wanted to practice with me every once in a while, vocab, grammar, etc. One night we went out to a movie together, and while the trailers were going, she wanted to practice vocab using topics taken from the trailers. She couldn't remember how to translate one of the words in the trailer from Hebrew to English. She struggled with it for maybe 15 to 20 seconds, and I absent-mindedly just finished the sentence for her. She couldn't believe I understood the Hebrew. I had to come clean. Told her I've known Hebrew this whole time, but she liked so much that I didn't. I just let her believe I didn't without contradicting her. She was okay with it by the time the movie was over, but it was an oh shit moment as soon as the words escaped my lips. Also, near the end I had her guess my age. Poor girl. She was so confused. Couldn't believe I was 14. She just kept responding with no, you're not. You're not 14. I had to accept I wasn't 14. I guess that's the problem when you can grow a full beard at 13. Went to an Italian restaurant in San Francisco with my Irish American wife's family. Small place. We were a group of 10, but a brother-in-law really wanted to eat there, so we were willing to wait for a group of tables to open up so we could sit. Host assured us it would not be a problem at all. We eventually sit at a table for 6 at most. All 10 of us crammed in. Waiter comes by, sees us packed around this table, and says in Italian to the host, "What the hell are you doing with these people? They can't sit like this and eat a meal." In the meantime, there is already wine on the table and everyone has poured glasses and is drinking, eating the bread, talking about how this might not work out. The host replies, "They are stupid faking Americans. They think this is the way we do things in Italy. They'll be fine." I'm sitting at the end of the table right by the two talking, and yell down to the other end, "Hey, will one of you stupid faking Americans pass down more wine?" And stand up and ask the host, "Do you think one of those stupid faking Americans at the other end of the table heard me?" By the way, I'm 6 feet 250 or so, and not out of shape. Everyone at the table freezes and stares at the host. He smiles, says he's so sorry, offers to get us more room. Everyone else gets up, cusses at the guy on the way out, and we all leave. Who the fuck uses stupid, faking, and Americans in any language around a group of Americans? Won't most people understand those words regardless of language? I was in Cancun for a wedding a couple years ago. I can't really speak Spanish, but I can understand it really well, and I can put sentences together. It just takes me a while. So the first night the whole group was there, we decided to go out to the bars and have a good time on the town. Before we left, I specifically told the entire group that the most simple rule in Cancun, but the one that gets the most people in trouble, is public urination. Everyone said they understood and they wouldn't do it. After the bars we start to walk back to the resort, and sure enough the groom and best man whip it out and start to pee. A man dressed in normal clothes walks up to them and flashes his badge. Oh shit, here we go. Just a little warning, the best man looks really bad in this story. The group as a whole want very well traveled. The police officer gathers the whole group and starts talking to us, saying he's taking the two that peed to jail for the night. All of a sudden the best man decides, that he has had enough of his rights being violated, and drunkenly begins to yell something along the lines of "I'm American, I have rights, you can't do this to me, I'm American fucking America." At this point I tell my friend to shut that dumbass up, unless he wants to be in real trouble. As the best man was yelling, the police officer called over a uniformed female police officer. My friend and I pulled both of them to the side and began to talk to them about how we could solve the problem without going to jail. Then they started talking in Spanish, something along the lines of "These stupid Americans think they can do whatever they want. How much do you think we can get out of them?" It took me a bit to find the words I wanted to say, but I finally replied with, "Not all of us are stupid, and I don't like that you guys are trying to cheat us and take our money." They both stopped talking and looked shocked that I could understand what they were saying. In English I said, "Listen, we are going to walk to our resort and we are going to stay there the rest of our trip. You won't see us ever again." After a slight delay the male cop left and the female cop waved us away. As a 6 feet 2 inches American of mixed descent, I have certainly experienced this. When I was living in India, people used to constantly talk about me in Hindi because I looked so obviously foreign. Unknown to them, I picked that shit up pretty quick. The most constant source of harassment came from other soccer players. I played centre mid and had to tackle lots of players, so things got fairly heated. One match I played for my school team, which was a lovely group of guys that were nowhere as good as my club team, led to an early corner kick from the opposition. The other team was obviously better and had a hotshot striker who liked to talk shit. Before the kick he was jostling with me whilst bragging in Hindi about how he was gonna score on my ass and such. I guess he assumed that I couldn't understand what he was saying. So I lined up with him, and when the kick went up I went over him. I was taller than him and have a decent vert from basketball for the clearing head and knocking him into the mud and then falling on him. Without missing a beat I stood up and made sure the ball was clear as the striker continued to flop about asking for a foul. The ref was having none of it. To rub salt in the wound I walked over to him and offered him my hand and said, "Nice goal," beach in Hindi just loud enough for him to hear. For the rest of the game he played like shit because he was tilting and ended up getting carded out. We managed to draw and advanced to the next round in PKs. I'd like to think that my lack of sportsmanship, I'm a terrible person I know, allowed us to win that game. This will probably get buried, but I'm willing to share how it has been for me throughout my life. It happens to me daily, but nobody really says anything insulting. I'm of Chinese descent and grew up in a myriad of places, London, Singapore, the US, but not China. But being in a Chinese speaking home, I've come to be bilingual. My English is better than my Chinese, but both are very fluent. There is no detectable accent in my English. Unfortunately, this also means that I don't exactly pass as an ABC, American-born Chinese. They often do not speak Chinese well enough to be fluently conversational, or an international Chinese student, because of how I look, and perhaps dress, and do my makeup. ABCs often think that I'm an international student, while international students often think that I'm an ABC. At the university, a great lot of people stereotype the good amount of international Chinese students who attend. Many Caucasians, ABCs, and international students are confused as to whether to talk to me in English or Chinese, and, when it comes to group activities in class, I'm often left out of both groups. Native English and native Chinese speakers often talk amongst themselves, asking one another whether or not I can speak English or Chinese, all well within hearing distance. When they get up the courage to ask me if I can speak English/Chinese, they are often surprised. It's been kind of difficult to make friends because of this barrier. This sort of situation happens every day in stores, restaurants, and such because of how strong the division is between races in my city. People always put on this unmistakable face of shock when they see me in a situation which requires me to speak in both languages. Many native English speakers talk to me slower if they think I can't speak in English. It's thoughtful, but I can't help but feel judged. I'm glad that my parents were able to give me the opportunity to be completely bilingual, but it's sometimes more difficult than it seems. Used to happen to me a lot in high school, mostly because a majority of the Mexicans and other Spanish speakers around me were very indigenous. My family is from Sinaloa, so most of my family is very light skinned with blonde or light brown hair, so I'm not very dark and some people didn't consider me Mexican enough. I grew up in Mexico and went to a bilingual school, so I don't have much of an accent. There are a few words that are still kind of tricky to pronounce, so that added to the racial misidentification. Often it would be comments about what I was wearing, or how I was stuck up for being from a large Mexican city, but sometimes there were some very hurtful comments, mostly stuff like she shouldn't call herself a Mexican, she isn't a true Mexican, or how I was whitewashed. I never really stood up for myself until a girl was loudly talking to her friends about how she wanted to beat me up and jump me after school, and how she was going to hit me in P.E. and make it look like an accident. I went up to them and told them in Spanish I could understand them, and they were very surprised. The girl said good thing and I just rolled my eyes. 14-year-olds have such great comebacks. They never spoke about me around me or bothered me again, but the whole situation left me very rattled. It was really hard to fit in with the other Mexicans at school, and that incident just made me realize that they would probably never like me just because I wasn't dark enough. I eventually made some Mexican friends though, so that was cool. I've been on a few student exchanges to both Germany and Russia. Those were awkward. There must be something about putting a bunch of teenagers who hardly know each other's languages together, because it seems to breed drama. There's this tension in the air. There is no one group. There's just us and them. You can't really hear all the little things that you can in your own language, and the social cues are different, which makes communicating hard. Everything is fine one moment and the next the German girl that had been sitting to the side is screaming at 3 of the Swedish girls for something they had supposedly said, and so on and so forth. Nothing like that happened to me in Germany though, except for the underage drinking debacle, but I didn't take the blame for that, and it's not part of this story. I'll save it for another time. In Russia the language barrier was even larger than that. My host was fluent, though he was 3 years older than all the other students, and studying to be an engineer. I hardly knew a word of Russian. He and his girlfriend were old students of the school we were going to go to, because the original host family had had an accident, and they volunteered to take me and a classmate in for 2 weeks. That was all fine, no problems there. My host family was pretty sweet, actually. The problem was, as always, the drama. It was a really nice school. They aimed to impress. There were couches and paintings everywhere, which was a little weird, to say the least. The classrooms were up to date. The cafeteria was nice. They even had a little school museum. Some things were pretty cool, such as the fact that we were staying at the Putin's old school, and some things were a little weird, such as the fact that the school's name was a number. And then, of course, there was the principal. Everywhere you looked, you could see her face. On the notice boards, on the televisions, hell, there was even a life-sized cardboard cutout of her in the museum, next to the school mascot, which was a beaver. It felt oppressive, somehow, to know you could be anywhere in the school and still see her face. It was some Big Brother style shit. But I didn't think much of it at the time. No, I stayed out of all the drama until the last day. There was still drama. Some people wrote some very nasty things to each other in the notebooks we were supposed to have as keepsakes, and some words were said that were never taken back. I was pretty oblivious to everything, actually, until my classmate pulled me aside as we were leaving the farewell dinner and asked me if I could stay home on the last day because some of the Russians were getting uncomfortable. There were the usual plans of going out drinking, without permission from the teachers, of course, and I had mysteriously heard very little about those plans. The Russians had found out that my mother was the principal of our school. Since I hadn't really interacted much with the Russian students except for my host and his girlfriend, they had let this rumor run wild. Suddenly I was a spy planted to make sure that the secret party they were planning would never happen, and since I hadn't said anything to them about it, I was hiding the fact that I was the principal's son from them. This had escalated because some of the Swedes didn't think it was right to exclude me from the party entirely, and that was what everyone had been whispering about all the time those last days. After listening to everyone's bullshit for a while, I just laughed and called my host to come pick me up. It was all just so stupid and unnecessary. Our hosts came along with some friends and my classmate had a change of heart. When I recounted the whole story to them, we ended up going to a bar for some drinks. It was an okay last night. When I was at a border town in Mexico, I went shopping at the various tiny knick-knack and jewelry stores with my family. We are the typical wonder-bred upper middle class tourist family of 4. I think I was 16 at the time. I'd had 4 years of Spanish classes by then. In these border towns, the vendors all give you this whole, hey rich Americans, you come into my shop. My shop is the best in town. You will love it spiel that is admittedly kinda fun. You get to feel like a king for a day. Anyhow, a guy comes from around the corner and says in Spanish, if you get these guys into my store next, I'll give you 10% of whatever they spend. I grin and ponder what's happening a bit. We finish in that store, and the guy is like, alright, next you've got to see my cousin. He's got stuff that I know you will like. Eventually I speak up in Spanish, really? And you get only 10%? If you got those silly tourists into my shop next, I would have given you 15%. The shopkeeper's response, in English, was something like, OHH, you speak Spanish, that's, great. Spanish back and forth comments pretty much stopped, and when they did speak, they were careful to try and do so especially fast and with as thick of a Mexican dialect as they could. Admittedly, this tactic was rather effective, since most of my experience had been the clean, clearly spoken Spanish you get in classes. All in all, it was sorta fun. Backstory, my family is Egyptian, so I can understand Egyptian Arabic fluently, but you would never guess because my mother, who I don't talk to since I was a toddler, is Irish and German and I definitely look more like her. Needless to say, it really surprises strangers when they know I understand. My mother's friends always have a hard time accepting that I know what they are saying when they speak in Arabic in front of me. A few comments about what they are talking about, and they very quickly understand how well I understand the language. My boyfriend of the time and I were walking through a department store when a little girl spotted me. At the time I was into goth/alternative clothing and accessories, so I was a sight to see. The little girl called over to her dad and said something along the lines of that girl looks so crazy. Why does she look like that? I immediately made angry eye contact with the father, who realized very quickly that I knew what she said and was shocked. He then started to guide the girl away from the area saying, who are you talking about? I don't see anyone. It was a fun moment. My stepmom used to have a nasty habit of talking smack about my friends in high school in front of them because only I could understand. I curbed that habit by responding to her in English so that my friends understood. My so's grandmother is from Mexico and speaks both Spanish and English, though with a clear accent. I'm from the United States and took Spanish for 6 to 7 years, high school and college. I've gotten rusty over the years because I have to fight my so to speak Spanish with me, and I don't see grandma often enough for her to be of help, but I can read, write, and understand fairly well. Anyways, I'm out shopping with Abula, and we head into a Tiendita, little Hispanic shop. The cashier can clearly tell we are not directly related and starts speaking to Abula in Spanish. She soon realizes that I'm the girlfriend, and suddenly I hear something along the lines of Ella es negrita, no, Ella no es mala. And she says a few more sentences all alluding to the fact that I'm mixed. I guess my black half was obvious. And whether or not I'm crazy/bad for my so, I give Abula the side eye with a small grin. She just winks at me and tells the woman, in Spanish, that I'm a good girl and that I understood what was just said. The poor cashier's eyes got huge and she turned all kinds of shades of red. Abula and I just smiled. Note, I typically tell Spanish speakers that I understand Spanish to avoid this type of situation, but this was a store and I didn't think it would be necessary. Cashiers are supposed to be polite in all languages, yes. Extra note, I have been back there a couple times since they season their chicken and beef wonderfully, but the cashier never quite meets my eye now. My mother is Dutch born. She moved to Malta and met my father and now reside on the island. When I was 18 years old, my 24-year-old sister and I had decided to start learning Dutch as a surprise for my mother's birthday. Also, to those interested, our uncle mother's youngest brother had recently moved to Malta and he was the one teaching us the language. A few weeks before her birthday I had a reasonable grasp of the language. My sister had lost interest. Now my mother used to call her sibling/mother whilst I was working, and by that time I was quite adept at understanding what was being said. It's kinda funny when you hear your mother swear. Worst thing was when she start talking about her sex life. I really didn't need to hear that. I ended up not telling my mother because this was too good of a perk to let her know. Few years later I ended up moving to NL due to work. She was adamant on teaching me the language, so I went with it. I still have no idea why I did so at the time. She was amazed at my quick learning. Never ended up telling her the truth because her thinking that she taught me Dutch made her extremely happy. Another story, which is much shorter. 2 weeks after moving to Holland, I had gotten on the train to the Horge. Two guys start talking in Maltese about how stoned they're going to get. I guess everyone who visits NL for the first time says so. Anyway, the trip is nearly an hour and a half long, so these guys got bored pretty quickly. They start eyeing the passengers, saying nasty stuff about girls etc. Then they moved on to me and started talking shit about how skinny, pale and abnormally tall Dutch people are. I even got called a stalk. I just let it pass. I was too tired to argue, so I just went to sleep. Halfway through the trip, I got woken up by the conductor, handed in my ticket, and was going back for my shooty. I then hear the obnoxious Maltese guys arguing with the conductor. Apparently they had gotten on the wrong train. See, they wanted to go to Amsterdam, not the Horge. I just stood up, talked to the conductor, and told him I'd take care of the guys. He was happy to get rid of the guys, said his thanks and hurried off. Then I just sat in front of them and started talking in Maltese, told them where to stop and which train they'd have to take. They remained silent for the rest of the trip and just said thanks in Maltese just before they left. I have a story. No one talks about me, but I was definitely being ignored. Had a rhyme Mexican. Spanish is my mother tongue, but I also speak English fluently. Sometimes people are not sure whether I'm Hispanic or Indian. I have an indigenous heritage, but I also can pass as Indian. Last year when I was pregnant with my first baby, I started going to the doctor every month for a regular checkup. At the doctor's office, my husband and I stood behind the sign that said, "Wait here," in order to respect people's privacy or something like that. Anyways, the person who was talking to the receptionist before me left, so immediately started walking towards the window because it was my turn. The receptionist makes a sign with her hand to wait while she picks up the phone, so I stopped not too far from the window. She didn't close it. I waited there while she was taking the call. Then unconsciously I started listening to her. I realized she was speaking Spanish, different accent but Spanish. She was giving advice about how whoever was on the phone with her, how she deserved better. The guys is a bastard, blah blah. Then she gets quiet and then I hear, "Are you faking kidding me?" Then she gets all upset and how men are animals, blah blah blah. I guess I should have stopped her and tell her that personal conversations in the middle of work are disrespectful for people like me who are waiting for her to stop gossiping. But I was so amused by her conversation, something about the tone, whatever, that I just waited. When she finally finished, she calls me and I talked to her in Spanish. She just stared at me and didn't say anything. She didn't even look at me, probably pretending nothing happened. Whatever, my husband told me I should have said something, but that day I was having my ultrasound done for the first time, and I was so excited to see my baby. I didn't feel like stressing out and ruining my day. I'm a foreigner living in Holland, and unlike a lot of foreigners there, I speak fluent Dutch. One day I was sitting outside a kebab shop waiting for our food with an Italian friend. He spoke a little bit of Dutch, but not really enough to have a decent conversation, so we would always speak in English to each other. These two guys walk up to the store and one goes in, while the other stays outside and lights up a cigarette. Meanwhile my Italian friend and I continue to have a conversation in English. After a few minutes the guy, the one who went inside, came back outside and wanted to talk to his friend. He began to whisper, but I heard the guy with the cigarette say, in Dutch, "Oh, don't worry about those two, they don't speak Dutch." Kinda dumb of him to just assume. The friend then started to talk about how the product was €40 a gram, and he didn't know if he should test it or not. They decided he should shoot some into his hand. to get a feel for it before they bought it. The guy went back inside, came out a few minutes later, and they left in a hurry. So to make a long story short, the kebab shop we were eating at was also selling heroin, I assume, out of the kitchen, and two clients should think about their conversation volume when they talk about such things, even if foreigners don't usually speak Dutch. Needless to say, I never ate there again. Bummer, cause their dinner was delicious. Be an English guy in Montreal about 8 or 9 years ago. Met up with a couple from New York City in a hostel. Off we go for some beers in a local sports bar. This bar could hold 600 if it wanted, but today it was holding about 80 tops. It's table service and the staff ain't exactly run off their feet. Hell no. We get a table, the waiter comes up, takes our order for 3 beers, fetches them rapidly. All is good for 30 minutes, until we run out of beer. We fruitlessly try to attract the attention of the 2 floor staff for a few minimum, who are blatantly ignoring us, so I go up to the bar to get some more beer, albeit after persuading the barmaid to wrench herself away from some gossip mag. 30 minutes later, same issue, same solution. After the end of the 4th round of this nonsense, we've had enough of this non-existent service, so ask for the bill, which ironically appears in a split second. We pay the bill, leaving a 50-cent tip to round it up to the nearest $5 because the service had been that staggeringly bad, and walk out. Barman comes running out of the bar after us. You know, leave me no tip, he says in a heavy Quebecois accent. I explain we did leave 50 cents. No, he says. In Canada, you leave 25%, not like the UK. I know an American tipping, I follow it, and the New Yorkers with me certainly know the score. 25% my ass though. I explained that his service was too poor to earn any tip, and nor was the barmaid's. He doesn't like this, and breaks into French. Ta mère est un pute. Your mother is a hoe, morceau de merde, piece of shit, that fi meta, go fuck yourself, etc. The New Yorkers are lost. I'm not. Once he stops for breath and to think of more insults, I ask him if he's finished, and if he wants to accept the tip. B. Come back to talk to his floor manager with me about why his does should be fired. Cue a stunned look on his face and much hurried backing away. The New Yorkers are bemused. What on earth did you say? They asked. Never mind, I said, let's get another beer. TLDR, in a Montreal bar with table service. No table service, so only leave a 50-cent tip. Barman uses lots of nasty French swear words about me, but I speak decent French. I'm German, but speak English on a C2 level, roughly educated native speaker level, and can move between a Californian or a New England accent, depending on who I talk to, as I tend to somewhat adopt the accent of people I talk to, and those 2 accents are the ones I heard/used most in my life. Also, I used to be an active couchsurfer and couchsurfing host, so I would often have Americans as guests and show them around town. Whenever it was time to hit the bars, my guests would try to hit on German girls and I would pretend to be an American as well, enabling me to just listen to all the private conversations the various girls would have amongst themselves in German, and manipulate the conversation accordingly to enable my guests to hook up with them. Or, even more often, it would put me in the perfect position to mess with their heads. My favorite time I did this was when I was in a local pub in Munich that served Kölsch, a beer from Cologne, where I grew up. Now, the pub had the name of the brand, Kölsch, printed on the glass. So I was asking some girls we were talking to what this ominous Kölsch was that we were drinking. They didn't know shit about it, so they made some random stuff up. I had to bite my tongue a couple of times, but I held my silence. Over the course of the evening, I would randomly bring up Cologne as a topic, and since one of them was into me, she would come up with the most retarded stories to impress me. When it was time to leave, I just turned to her when we said our goodbyes and told her, hopefully, without missing a beat in my broadest Colognian dialect, that she was full of shit and should never insult my hometown again. The look on her face was priceless. I'm so awfully late to this, but as a white female in China I got talked about on a daily basis. Apparently they see more male foreigners than female and they always seem to assume I can't understand them. A couple memorable experiences. I was in a 3-story mall that sold nothing but cell phone accessories, and two of the clerks started fighting about not wanting to be the one who helped me. The female clerk spoke more English than the male clerk, so he made her follow me around. Then they started betting over whether I could understand them or not. Since the female had to basically stay within 3 feet of me, I made her follow me around the whole store without saying a word to them until the bet got higher and higher. She thought I understood what was going on and was telling him they should stop, and he thought I was just indecisive and stupid. The bet got to 200 yen, which was like $40 when I finally said, "Hey service person, you can't judge a person by their appearance, but you're lazy and make her help me. She tells you to stop and you don't listen. Now you owe her 200 yen. You should help the next white person customer too." Before walking out, I don't think either of them were expecting me to say anything at all, and that it was going to sit as an idle bet, but the girl was pretty much dying of laughter when she realized she won. The other one, I was in a smaller city with my fiance, where there were less foreigners. A little girl with pigtails ran up to me with her finger pointed shouting, "Foreigner. Mom, look, I see a foreigner. You should sell her something 3 times the price." I turned around and shouted, "Hey baby, look. It's a Chinese person. I see a Chinese person. We better not go buy from that shop. She said she won't give me a good deal." The little girl's jaw completely dropped and she ran back into the shop so fast and hid. Her friends were laughing and teasing her, and her mom, who was the shopkeeper, laughed so hard she fell to her knees. Her mom told us they hadn't seen a foreigner who spoke Chinese in over 6 months and that their Chinese was horrible. She'd been trying to teach her daughter a lesson for a while and she hoped that would finally do it. I'll give it a try. I speak Mandarin, Japanese and English. Once me and my dad was back in China for holiday and we were riding a precinct seating train. We had a large suitcase and my dad left it in luggage area, but it was sticking out a bit. 2 Russian guys comes on with can of beer in hand and sits on our suitcase, since they bought the standing tickets and had nowhere to sit. My dad got slightly offended and told the 2 guys in Mandarin to get off the case. The 2 was bit drunk at that time and starts to swear at my dad in English non-stop. I got annoyed, so I turned around and told them to shut up in English. This probably set them off, and then they started to trash talk at me even more in their heavy Russian accented English. I fought back, of course, in English, which is virtually native, and the 2 guys realized they can't win me if we argued in English. So they switched to Mandarin, thinking I was some banana. I immediately switched to Mandarin and argued back. My Mandarin is native. They blanked out for a secretary, probably didn't expect my Mandarin to be also native, and switched back to English. We argued for about 10 minutes switching between English and Mandarin. They were so loud that they eventually had half a train of angry Chinese people telling them to go learn Mandarin then come back and trash talk. The train service personnel finally came after about half an hour, telling them either to shut up or get off the train. The 2 got shut down, so they just grumbled the rest of trip in Russian. And I started talking to my dad in Japanese how I was furious, which my dad stopped me, since Chinese person pretending to be Japanese isn't something you'd want to do with a bunch of angry Chinese people.